and welcome to another edition of Mental Health Moments. So happy to be here with you again this week. And um, when we first started these mental health moments, one of the things that I talked to you about was just the value and the importance of establishing healthy rhythms in your life, and how that could really positively impact your mental health and well-being. Today I want to talk about the flip side of that coin, which is, what do you do when you've got some really strongly ingrained unhealthy patterns, unhelpful rhythms in your life? And as I reflected on this past week, I got thinking about kind of the idea of trailblazing, and probably that image came to mind because throughout COVID we have done a ton of walking, and maybe you have too. And we have a lovely path nearby our house, and my children actually in the spring really loved what we called off-roading. They loved kind of leaving the paved trail and following these rougher trails through the forest, and kind of, we called it adventuring, and it was a lot of fun. But what it gets me thinking about is that those trails, the more we walk them, the more people travel them, the more well-worn they become, and the easier they become to follow. And the more defined those off-road trails get, the less likely we would be to kind of forge our own way through. And I could imagine that if we started taking bikes down those trails, and if we rode our bikes in just the right spot along those trails for long enough, you would start to develop this groove in the path. And the more you traveled it, and the deeper the groove gets, the harder it would become to shift off of that path, right? It would just become ingrained until that became kind of the only option of how you could travel. And so what this gets me thinking about is when we have patterns of thinking and behaving and ways of being, rhythms, developing these rhythms to our lives that we do over and over again. The more we repeat them, the more ingrained they become, and the more difficult it becomes to change them. And if you have ever struggled in your mental health and well-being, I think you can relate to this idea of how strongly connected our mental health is to these rhythms that we can get stuck in. Negative thinking patterns and behaviors that that we know aren't what we would like to be doing. We know that it's not good for us, but we can't seem to change and to do it any different. And so that can leave you feeling really stuck. And yet, all the while, as you're feeling stuck, the more you continue in those patterns, the more ingrained and settled in they become. And this can start to feel pretty hopeless, I think. So one thing I've noticed is that often we can see the change that we'd like to happen. Often we can think about, if only I could do this, if only I could change this. We often know what those things are, but when you look at the big picture and you think about trying to change it, it gets overwhelming pretty quickly. Right? When you just kind of write out the list of all the things that you wish were different or you could change. And so realistically, what's doable is to find one thing, right? Just one thing. But sometimes it can feel like the one thing that you have the capacity to maybe try to reach for isn't enough to make a difference. And so we say to ourselves, why bother? It's too small a thing. and so we leave it. We don't want to, that little bit of energy that we have, we don't want to spend it chasing after that little thing that feels like won't make a difference. So hold on to that for a second, and I just want to quickly tell you about a model that we often use in kind of in the world of counseling to understand mental health, and it is the biopsychospiritual. Ooh, I missed one. Let's try that again. Biopsychosocial spiritual model, and we won't get too technical, and we won't dive in too deep into that, but as you may have already guessed, this is a model that acknowledges that if we're going to look at our mental health, we need to look at the whole person, right? Body, mind, and soul. And so we look at our biology, we look at our psychology, we look at our social selves, and we look at our spirituality. And when you think about the causes of mental health, we know that you could look at any one of those four areas and find something, maybe a contributing factor to either your mental health or your mental unhealth, and whether that is brain chemistry and genetics, or other types of things that impact your brain health, like brain trauma and injuries and that sort of thing. You can look at your psychology, and so your thinking patterns, the way that you make sense of the world, trauma maybe in your history, that kind of connects in with your social self, the relationships that you have, and that thriving, healthy, connected relationships has a positive impact on your mental health, where isolation and loneliness, or painful and difficult relationships in your life can cause a great deal of difficulty and pain, and can impact your brain. And finally, spirituality, and sometimes in the church this is a little bit I don't know, it's tricky territory, I guess, because on one hand, you might not want to hear me say that there are things about our spirituality that can damage our mental health and well-being, and that includes, when we have an unhealthy or untrue understanding of who God is and how He works in the world, right? So when you see God as someone who's very punishing and harsh, that impacts your well-being and how you understand yourself in the world and your value, versus the positive impact your spirituality can have when you understand how deeply valued you are in God's sight, and that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, when you feel secure in a sense of His unconditional love. And so we know as well that theology, I'm going to call it bad theology, can really impact our mental health and well-being quite significantly, and one of the ways I see this play out often is in our theology of suffering. And I don't know if you have thought this way or have ever heard somebody else think this way, but when we come to God with the belief that if we're doing everything right in our walk with the Lord, that no bad thing will ever happen to us, and that we won't experience pain. That kind of thinking, that kind of approach to our faith is not scriptural, and causes all sorts of damage in our lives, because then as painful things happen in our lives, as difficulties arise, as we face struggles, it leaves us questioning God. It leaves us questioning His love for us. It leaves us questioning ourselves, feeling like we haven't measured up. And so all of these facets of life impact our mental health, right? Spirituality, our relationships, our psychology, and our biology. And maybe that can get a little overwhelming to think about all of those different realms and how they are impacting your mental well-being. But the good news is then that there are things in every single one of those categories that can be a strength, that can be protective, that can boost your mental health. And so we know that exercise on the biological level or medication, we know that socially in relationships, right? If we can not be isolated and find connection and find healthy relationships, that can make a huge difference. And in our spiritual lives, you know, we could talk for hours about the many ways that our faith and our spirituality can boost our sense of well-being and the peace that we have. So all of those areas can be positively impacted, can have a positive impact on our mental health. And what I love the most is that actually a change in any one of those 4 areas can actually shake you loose from, can shake the whole system loose, right? And I think we intuitively know this a little bit when you think about the way that exercise, for example, can impact your brain chemistry, right? We think about how talk therapy, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but psychotherapy can create the same changes in the brain that medication does when you're treating mental health. And so all of these different areas, they overlap in such a beautiful way, because a positive change in any one area can bring about long-term change for your whole self. So the point that I hope you can take away today, and there's so much more I wish I could say about all of this, but the point that I hope you can take home is that that one small change, and if you remember me saying that sometimes we feel like, why bother? Why do that one little thing? Because it's not going to make a difference. I'm so stuck. I'm so overwhelmed. That one small thing can actually be the thing that will make a world of a difference. And I like to say that we often have to measure, a sense of progress, not in, hours or even in days, but sometimes in months. And so if you can reach for those little things that will make a difference, that help to boost your well-being, even if it's just for a moment. If you can faithfully reach for those things again and again and again, day after day, when you look back a month from now or 2 months from now or 3 months from now, you'll be surprised to realize, wow, I'm not where I was. You don't always notice the change right away, but the change will come. And so I hope that I can encourage you today. And certainly there are many things in your spiritual life that you can do that will boost your mental health and well-being. And, things that we often experience in our faith life as we journey with God, the sense of hope that we can experience in Christ, the sense of purpose and meaning that our faith brings to our life, and especially serving others and caring for others brings a great deal of purpose, and the sense of community and belonging that we can have as we engage in our faith community. All of those things are significant in boosting our mental health and well-being. Those are at the top of the list of things that we need to be healthy and whole and well. And so I hope that encourages you today. I'll leave you with one final scripture verse, and I have to apologize. There's always so much that I want to say to you about mental health that I seem to always be going long. And so thank you. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching and listening, and well done, I'll say that. But the verse I just want to leave you with is one that I find fosters a great deal of hope every time that I reflect on it. And it's from John 1, verse 5, and it says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And I love this verse because, it does acknowledge that the darkness is present, that there is darkness that we deal with, that we experience, that is out there in the world. But it's such a hopeful thing to remember that, Jesus, the light of the world, came, and he came to bring hope, and he came to bring light into the world, and that light, that saving light, cannot be extinguished by the darkness. It has no power to do that. And I just find that to be such a hopeful thing to hold on to, and I hope it encourages you today. See you next week.